My name is Chimwemwe Phiri. I'm from Malawi, and I work with Malawi School of Government, which is a school that kind of like enhances issues to do with governance, but also institutional capacity building. And my area of specialization is in development studies with a specific focus on climate change. So I try to do a bit of research, but also teach in terms of how issues of climate change, can be well mainstreamed in the policies using evidence from the ground. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Queen Linda Chinozvina. I'm from Zimbabwe, University of Zimbabwe. I'm currently pursuing my PhD as a PhD fellow under Critical Zones for Africa Science, where I'm looking at an African environmental framework for linking livelihoods and habitability. So currently I'm working at the University of Zimbabwe again as a planner. So I'm a planner by profession who is mostly interested in research to do with social resilience, social issues, and policy-related issues. Yes.
All right, yeah, my name is Nyimbili Suzyika. I'm a PhD student at the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein. I am part of a research group, the Higher Education and Human Development Research Group, the Sachi Chair in Higher Education and Human Development, where we use mainly we use the capability approach to try and understand development issues. My study is also on higher education and human development. I'm focused on cultural heritage. I try to see the role of higher education institutions, the role they can play in conserving and safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. And more recently, I get to be more interested in ideas around political economy of heritage, as well as political economy of higher education.
We work with issues to do with governance, but also institutional capacity building. And normally the focus is on informing government, but also institutions within the country on how best, they can formulate evidence-based recommendations, but also policy actions. So my focus, my area of research is on issues to do with university community partnerships in terms of how universities can offer or can act as agents for community transformation, especially by working closely with communities, not necessarily as a passive recipient, but also not just as means to an end in the process, but ensuring that the communities are part and process of the decision making around how best universities can, transform their well-being. You might be aware that Malawi is one of those countries that is hugely affected with the issues of impact of climate change. And then we need solutions that are designed from local levels, grassroots solutions that are owned by the communities. So the idea for me is to try to establish the kind of partnerships that should be there for communities and also in universities, so that these solutions, these adaptation solutions should be grounded, from the ground, so that there's a bit of ownership, sustainability, but also the community themselves, they should feel part of the process. Yeah, so we've normally focused on that. So the idea is to inform both policy and practice. Like I said, we need government also to offer guidance in terms of how universities should design their programs, how they should fit in their curriculum, how they should train the students, so that they should prepare them once they get out of the university, once they graduate, that they should be able to apply these skills to the communities, and also the community themselves, they should feed into the university agenda in terms of curriculum development, partnership issues, but also all the entire process of how they can improve, also address societal issues. So it aligns quite a lot with the Malawi School of Government. Like I said, it's something to do with issues with policy, but also issues to do with transformation in terms of leadership, but also looking at how government should be able to support society change in the aspect of issues of climate change, especially since climate change is quite a huge issue within our development frameworks. So I would briefly say that. Thank you.
My research is on beyond tokenism, where we are saying we're trying to bridge the gap that is there between engaged research and policy making. So you find that I'm looking at two policies which were implemented in Zimbabwe, and another statutory instrument like the master plan process, which was done, which started last year. But then I was looking at how these policies or these statutory instruments or policy statements or regulations that are being used and how they are affecting people like at local level. So I find with this research, I'm looking at spatial planning policies, those planning regulations that are being used, and how those policies have engaged the public. So I find that the marginalized, they are always the ones that are affected by the policies, and also the extent at which they are engaged is also limited. So the social issues that I'm looking at are issues to do with housing, issues to do with also to have a collateral as people, even at the grassroots. So it finds policies or engaged research or the voices of the people, they are actually incorporated at the end. So one of the policies that I looked at is Operation Garikai Hlalani, which was a solution to a policy which was Operation Murambachina, where they were trying to do away with informal settlements. But then it goes back to say, how did we come up with these informal settlements before we even come up with a policy to address that? Are we now providing housing, or is just a policy which is coming in, not really clear to say it's addressing the social issues of those that are marginalized, or it's only a way to upgrade those that are already in need? So it finds the way it was implemented, those that were affected, you find at least 60,000 households were affected by that policy. And some of them, we don't even know where they are right now. They up to now, they don't even have a place to stay, yet they were displaced by the policy. So it finds it's something where when you then engaged with the residents to say, did this policy address, or were they compensated, or was there any compensation to say you are also being resettled to another area? So we find these social issues, they are still there, they are still happening, and people, they are still suffering. And also, if you go to the master plan and also the Urban Councils Act, or how these policies or they are being implemented, we find it is the voice of those in power. And also the issue of the limitations of funding, they also affect how you do engaged research. So the councillor, if you go to the Act, you find the councillor has the powers to represent wherever they are leading the people. So you would hear the voice of the councillor more, or the member of the parliament, instead of the public. So there are social issues, they remain there. There are no solutions, rather, but we have the blueprints, we have all the policies in black and white, yet the social issues, they remain, or the social challenges, they are still emerging in that.
All right, thank you. So my study focuses on the role of higher education in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. I think there's a lot of debate around whether higher education institutions could be a place where indigenous forms of performance or indigenous knowledge could actually be preserved, looking at the structures of the university in a number of our countries. that are coming from a background of colonization, and also that seems to still be Eurocentric in the way they operate. So in my case, I tried to look at one particular degree program that was introduced in 2018 with funding from UNESCO and also some funding from the Zambian government to try and enhance the country's capacity to be able to safeguard intangible cultural heritage. So I try to look at that, and I also look at it from a human development perspective to try and see the students that are going through this program, the graduates, as well as the lecturers. What is it that, what are opportunities are accrued to them in terms of their ability to take part in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, and also actually see intangible cultural heritage as something of value. So I must say, initially, it was not really about engaged research, or at least I didn't think about it that much, But when I do the work, I collect data. I work with the lecturers and the graduates, the students, the cultural experts, and some representatives from the community, and also realizing that this is quite a new program where the stakeholders are actually interested to learn what will come out of my research, and they're looking forward to say, okay, what are you as a PhD student going to say about this program that we could actually get and use and therefore use in the curriculum of this degree program. So for me, engaged research is really working with these different groups involved that are saying, we would like to make use of what you'll be able to get out of this. And also I was privileged to use a more participatory approach as well. I used photovoice, where we sat together with the students. They talked about their experiences about this degree program and what it actually means for them to be able to say, okay, this is intangible cultural heritage. This is part of my heritage as a Zambian. And when I make these comparisons, I learn quite a lot, even from here in South Africa, where I see a bit more appreciation of the different languages that people speak, that are used even in university settings. Of course, there are challenges there, but it's something that you could say, okay, how can we also apply some of these things in the Zambian context or in the Malawian context? What can we learn from these different aspects? And also, lastly, seeing that this particular degree program is quite unique and specific, the Bachelor of Arts in Intangible Cultural Heritage. And when you look at the region, of course, there are cultural studies, and when you look at studies, there's an increased number of studies in cultural heritage focusing on the African continent. But this is a very particular degree program that can then inform other settings as well in the region rather, and also institutions like UNESCO are doing quite a lot of work around intangible cultural heritage and education. Not much of higher education, but I see the opportunity to be able to influence these spaces.
Okay, so I think I'll start by picking up from what my colleague just mentioned here around what engaged research is, and I think then I'll kind of try to answer that as I respond to that. So I think over time, when we talk about research working with communities, mostly the idea was I have an idea as a researcher, and then I would want to find a solution to something, or I observe something, or maybe I learn about something, maybe from literature or just observation, and then I go and ask the communities and I engage with them. In that way, it was mostly top down, kind of like extractive in nature, because I am the one kind of like leading the process of change of that. But in engaged research, what we're trying to say is to work with the communities all through, like let them be part of the whole process, to say, okay, here we have equity principles. What do you have on the table? What do I have on the table? So that's reciprocity and co-designing. So that's where the key aspect of co-creation comes into the fore. So in response to what you just asked, the idea is to see you need a multi-dimensional, a multi-stakeholder kind of like approach to co-creation or co-knowledge production, because the issue centers around what does each partner brings on the table, and who holds the power dynamics. So is there equity around all those things? So if you have to call something as a co-research or co-creation, first of all is you look at the dimensionality of the research process itself, and then you look at what do each stakeholders bring to the table on an equal footing. In other ways is to say we need to generate solutions by involving everybody on an equal footing, and not necessarily showing that this person probably is the generator of the idea. Of course, I mean, technically we might have different technical expertise, but in terms of operation aspect, you understand the context in which we are operating, and then the idea should be around, okay, how do we engage communities? How do we engage stakeholders, let's say government? Where do policy frameworks come into the fore? So it's more like a conversation that has to show or demystify issues of power structures, on the ground. So that's something that we have to focus more when we talk about issues of co-creation, issues of equity. Yep.
Policy issues, they're a bit sensitive, and you'll find that there are different disciplines with people from different disciplines that have been there in those same communities. They have come with their questions, their experiences. They want to gather data from the same communities. So in our case, in Zimbabwe, we find that there are communities where researchers, they continuously go there to gather data. Why? Because they have a lot of issues that are happening there. So you find these social issues that I'm looking at, issues to do with planning issues, housing issues, water, the services, utilities within or a community. They are serious issues. So I find the policies that I'm looking at, they actually address those issues, those land use issues. So now to then engage them and also to fully immerse yourself into that community, it will be a bit sensitive because they have heard that, they are now tired, and also they have that mentality to say it's more extractive and performative. You just come, you get data and you go. So the best way was to conduct some interviews, some focus group discussions, and also conduct some surveys. But also taking into consideration those local leaders. Because most of these, I would say, informal settlements which are coming up, and also these communities where people, they have been displaced and they have gone there to rebuild and bounce back and adapt to shocks. They're a bit protective. They protect themselves. They have their own local leaders, and they have some residents association. So those were some of the people that were key in engaging and also collecting data. So also with these focus group discussions, you'll find that the issues to do with power, they keep on coming when it comes to issues to do with land use in those communities, where you cannot take people, you gather them, maybe a group of 9 or 10 people. They have that fear to say what they need to say because their leader is there. So these interviews, I worked with some focus group discussions. Then I realized that the information or the data was a bit limited because of these issues. Then I did some one-on-one surveys and find what the same person was saying when you're conducting a focus group discussion is now different from a one-on-one survey. So I would say it was a mixed method approach to try and triangulate and gather data. Okay, I would say we have had researchers, and we have, I think, more than 15 universities in our country. We have more than 5,000 people graduating every year, and you would find these areas, maybe they are there in the shelves, white and black and white, as dissertations or theses, and we keep on hearing these issues even when we go for research. So an engaged research inspired me to say, why not go and engage the community? Because it has been the norm that the community, it becomes some formality to say we have done public participation when we are now doing policy formulation. So to now then engage them and also make them part of the policy and those actual community-based projects and things like that. So it's something that inspired me to say, if we are to work with the community, will there not be a change in the way our policies are being implemented? Because at the end of the day, policies, I would say, they usually, to some extent, might do public participation. But then, who is formulating the policy and whose interests are being addressed by the policy? So I would say, even if we are to do public participation and come up with those findings, we produce some reports, some policy briefs, but at the end of the day, who is in power and whose interests are being addressed. So taking a different approach to engage research, I believe, to bring something different to what is already.
Okay, so I think in the context of Malawi, like what I mentioned earlier about Malawi School of Government, that our mandate is to ensure that we influence public governance in different sectors, especially issues that concern society or being in our context. So what we do is we provide solutions, but these have to be evidence-based. And what we do is we go on the ground, so we engage with different stakeholders that we need to, so that we can come up with that evidence. So in my context, for instance, we are looking at, okay, what's going wrong? We have solutions. We have an institution of an academic institution in our locality. But then why is it that communities around it are so poor? Communities around it are failing probably to practice sustainable agriculture technologies, but yet we have an institution that is offering academic programs, even internship, but also partnership with those communities. So what we do is we go on the ground and we speak to different stakeholders. The idea is to generate evidence. That is, you can take up, for policy level influence. So in that case, you start with that engagement with local communities at that level, at the grassroots level, okay? And then once you find out that evidence, you co-create that knowledge. So these are the identified areas that probably need, a bit of change or a bit of rectifying or a bit of prioritization. So you take it up to different stakeholders, who can now influence policy. So that's where government stakeholders come in. And normally what we do is we kind of like organize interface meetings, okay? So we invite different stakeholders, depending on the subject itself. Like in my case, if it's issues with climate change, then we have to engage the line ministries, natural resources, and all other line ministries, because this is kind of like a resilience building issue. So there are different sectors, agriculture and all that. And then we have a conversation around what's happening on the ground using the evidence that we generated. But mind you, we are not leaving the communities on the ground because we started with them. So we also take them so that we can amplify their voices at that national level. Okay, so the idea is the stakeholders should be able to not just read the statistics which are presented in the graphs in what, which are too academic and all that, but they should also listen to the voices on the ground. So those interface meetings kind of like illuminate those challenges from the ground, but now listening from the actual participants that year. So aside these interface meetings, what we also do is we issue policy briefs, because that's also one of our specializations. So we come up with policy briefs and then make sure that those policy briefs are kind of like circulated and also come up with a multi-stakeholder approach. Not just engage with government, because for government also to work, it also needs a bit of pressure. I would say that political pressure. So you engage CSOs, you engage the UN body, you engage different stakeholders that can be of influence to government. And then when you have that collective voice to say, look, this is the issue on the ground. How best can we resolve this issue? And then you see that there will be a bit of agency in government, but also there might be prioritization, or probably if it reaches that higher level, it might also influence the policy direction, a new policy change. So, okay, probably this is one issue that hasn't been addressed. I'll give an example of, I think there was a time that we were reviewing the one of the, I think it should be the disaster risk management policy. And, when we did the assessments, the consultations on the ground, we realized and understood that issues of gender were not really coming out, as quite an issue. Okay, and then the idea was, okay, as we're reviewing this other policy, how can we push the idea for gender mainstreaming, not necessarily as mainstream, but also as a key component of the policy. So you involve different stakeholders that are also like-minded. They also do research in the same, and not forgetting the community on the ground, because at the end of the day, government makes policy not for itself, but for the people. So the people have to be in the conversation right from the start until the end. So I would say the approach differs, and it's at different levels, starting from the grassroots at district level, because the district level also has a district development plan that also outlines those issues, and then you take them up or you cascade them further at the national level. So in that whole process, the most important thing is you do not have to leave anyone behind. So I'll speak to one or two, and then my colleagues can also speak to them. So I think the main challenge in the context of Malawi is the issue of that disconnect between academic deliverables and also from the policy aspect perspective. So in academia, sometimes you may have timelines. And I think the issue with me is most of the research is funded in the context of Malawi, and something that is funded as a timeline. Okay? So you get a funding and then say within 2 years, you need to come up with the results, whether it's policy, whether it's articles, and all those things. But when you look at issues of policy, it's quite a process. When you look about issues about involving the communities, it needs time, it needs trust. So there's normally that conflict of disconnect between the expectation from the academia timelines and also from the community, but also from the policy perspective. And remember, when you touch the issues of the policy, it goes to issues of politics. Because now it's about government also working at its own, time frame, regarding, okay, should we effect this policy change or should we not effect this policy change? So there's always that kind of tension to bridging the gap. Yeah, so I think that's one of the changes that I would mention. The other one, sometimes we might be limited. Sometimes we conduct rushed research, not rushed per se, but sometimes we can move things faster for the sake of issues of funding, because you are tied and there's no flexibility in terms of donor funding, like in the case of my country, in most cases. So you have a timeline that you need to complete, and then if you don't complete, then the funds goes back. So there isn't that flexibility to say we can just and incorporate emerging issues within the process of research. And in the end, we end up coming up with something that probably, yes, might address the issue, but maybe just not necessarily going back to the underlying issues. Because I remember I said, if you really want to find out underlying issues, especially those that are affecting communities, the idea is you need time, you need trust, you need relationship, and you cannot do that within 6 months, within a year. Okay, so that's one of the things I can mention.
I'll just take from what you also said and also add on that to say, when you start talking about policy, you stretch its politics. So you'd find that the agenda behind those policies, what is it that you want to achieve? Is it, do you want to reflect yourself as people who are performing, or do you want to say maybe in the 5-year term that you have, you should have maybe come up or drafted a number of policies? But then I would say sometimes researchers we are described as over ambitious, and also we sometimes have we sometimes we do those mistakes where we want to adapt some other recommendations from other places, and we think they work in our own context. So like you said that it takes time, we should take time, and those things to say we have some timelines and whatnot, sometimes it might not really work. To say, have we done a feasibility study, the situation analysis, to say if we are to come up with this policy, is it going to really link with, also are we going to be able to apply, are we going to be able to implement it in our local context? So to then bridge the gap between academic and policy, I'll say it's something that we really need to advocate for, because there is still a gap, because in our context, I'll try to be a bit neutral and friendly to say sometimes researchers, we have the real findings, right? We go and research, we have our findings, statistics, and recommendations. But then how we present, and like I said earlier, whose interest, and I like the presentation that was done during the day where we were talking about artificial intelligence. So I was commenting to say, artificial intelligence is okay, digitalization, Internet of Things and all that is really okay. But then, is it not going to expose some of those hidden agendas that we have? So I find us as researchers, we are advocating, for example, for artificial intelligence. But then those recommendations that we are taking to say we should include this, we should incorporate this into policy, is it not going to somehow affect what the policy agendas intends to achieve?
Yeah, so of course I've studied home, and then I studied also in the global north, as they would like to put it. And then when I came back home and I applied to South Africa, I think one of the major thing was that there was funding, right, through the Sachi Chair in Higher Education and Human Development, so which, you know, might be missing in some of our countries. So I think that was a major issue. There was funding provided to do research. So I came. And then when I also came, I think just realizing that within our research group are leading scholars, not just on the African continent or just here in South Africa, but globally. You find that when you talk about scholarship around the capability approach, our research group actually has leading scholars. So I think that was a great thing for me to actually experience. And also just being here and realizing that through our center, through the people who have graduated from our center, who are from the region, there's this whole process of trying to create connections amongst ourselves. And as I do research in higher education, you realize that even in terms of collaboration around publishing, there is need for us to be able to engage among ourselves as Africans, right? When we have discussions around publishing and scholarship and how South Africa relates with other countries, you realize that centers like ours at the University of the Free State, with a number of students from the region, help to create the necessary connections amongst ourselves as Africans in the region. So I think that's what I would say about my experience being here.
Well, I think what I'm going to say is that it's been so transformational for me, in the sense that maybe I can speak to 3 issues around the same issue of transformation. Now, I think number 1 is about issues of networking. Number 1 is issues of understanding the aspect and the concept of engaged research. It's not a new concept. About hearing about engaged research. But what this conference has done, first of all, is kind of like enhance my professional understanding or my ability to articulate and understand and debate the scholarship of engaged research. We have had 2 days of amazing and brilliant conversations that spoke around the debates on how best we can do issues of engaged research. And I think there are quite a lot of key takeaways that we're able to gather from the conference. For me, it's about, first of all, the ethical responsibility in the whole issues of the whole process of engaged research. But also when you look at the issue of reflexivity and how do you define co-creation, it's one of the things I think that we actually was a big issue, unpacking co-creation, because you have different frameworks, you have different building blocks that others would present around what they think co-creation is. But there was 1 or 2 pillars that, were almost like evident in all the presentations. And one of them was the issue of trust, issues of relationships. Once you have trust, you have relationship with the communities, and then you can move on from that. So from my professional perspective, I kind of like have a different understanding, or I've kind of like improved my understanding in terms of how, co-creation has to be as the main theme of that. Also how we can undertake engaged research. And the other aspect, I think, is the niche of networking. We have brilliant scholars here, NRF-rated scholars. I think there are also other scholars from other countries, not just here in South Africa. And that brought a different perspective, in terms of how engaged research is viewed from different countries. And I think from the Global South perspectives, we seem to be moving toward the same direction in terms of how best we can engage the communities. But it was quite more interesting that to bring that diverse, a picture of how different countries are able to, build that scholarship around engaged research. So I think these are the 2 things that I can mention. But in general, I think it's been a very transformational process. I go back with very good takeaways, and my colleagues can also add on that.
Yeah, so I think Queen mentioned at some point that we kind of overestimate ourselves as academicians. I'm not so sure if that's the exact word you used. And I remember in my first year when I tried to do, at least by that time, I was just thinking participatory research, right? I didn't even think much about engaged research. And I wanted to do a participatory aspect in my research, and people were like, okay, you are overestimating yourself. Just go and do your PhD, and it ends there. And I still went ahead and did it. So coming to this conference and looking back, I get a better understanding of what engaged research is, beyond just saying, okay, I'm going to have a participatory aspect in my research, but how do I really engage the participants, and also growing as an early career researcher now, and also just about to finish my PhD and thinking about PhD students that I talk to. If they want to learn about engaged research, I am a resource now, right? I can engage with them and say, okay, this is how you can work around it. This is how you can work around the challenges of time and all those things. So I think it's been a great opportunity to be able to come here. I think, like Chimwemwe mentioned, to meet different scholars, to meet people who work for the Human Sciences and Research Council, who are in, organizing all these things, is really a a great thing. And also just to be able to make your presentation, get feedback. I've been to some conferences where, yes, you present, but maybe you in the room, you are probably you and another presenter and another presenter. It's a good thing, but also it's better like here as a early career researcher, you present to more people, you really get that feedback from them. It's really a good platform and something to be proud of.
As for me, I found the conference very informative, and it has given me a platform to also share some Zimbabwean realities, and also it has someone encouraged me and inspired me to say it is possible to actually immerse yourself within the communities, as much as there are some challenges, but there are a number of issues that were raised when we were during the conference to say you can use these methods and the methods that have been used by some other colleagues or researchers. So, and also going back home to University of Zimbabwe and also like the academic institutions where we are being encouraged to focus on education 5.0. So coming here, it has been so eye-opening, because sometimes you are told this is now our academic policy or our education policy to say education 5.0, but looking at the pillars to say it includes community engagement, it includes research, it includes issues to do with collaboration. So I was just reflecting to say, so really that's what really means, and it's something that it's now easy for me to go back and implement, and also as I'm pursuing my PhD. Then also for this paper that I was presenting during the conference, it has also made my life much more easier, and I'm going to I would say my paper, I'm going to produce something which is very colorful and nice. Then also there were a lot of issues that were raised across disciplines. To say you don't have to limit yourself to say I'm a planner, so I just focus on issues to do with land use, issues to do with land use policy, spatial planning, zoning and whatnot. So it gave me an opportunity to say you can also look at issues to do with drug abuse. You can also look at issues to do with sexual reproductive issues. So it's all comes back to say at the end of the day you want to address issues in research. So it was something which was very informative, and I don't know what to say. It was perfect. Yes. Okay. From the experience that I've had during this HSRC Engaged Research Conference, I would say it has given a platform to women. So when I got here, I was like, so many ladies here. You know, you just feel inspired, and you see yourself to say, but she's a professor. You know, they were so bold, they were so confident, the eloquence and all that. So I think HSRC, it has given women an opportunity to be visible, the opportunity to impact into the world. So I would say a platform like this, the globally, I would say if we continue having such platforms, women, they will go far. And also it has allowed me to see how women how women are out there, and to say they are not that a traditional aspect that we used to have, to say women, they are not, they cannot stand in front of people, they cannot say out their voices. But it was a platform where you would see that you feel challenged to say, even as a woman, I can do this, I can also do this. So it was, I would say if you continue having such platforms, it will inspire many women. And even those that feel that inferiority complex, you know, they'll be uplifted and they'll go out there and also impact to their nations. Given that it was a regional platform, a number of people from different countries, from different areas and continents, is something that if you go back into our nations, go back to our countries, to our continents, it's going to impact, and it's going to also, it has influenced us to say we can also have our own conferences, even at a local scale. So I would say it's something which I think HSRC is doing great to empower women and let them be visible and be heard.
I think firstly it's just because sometimes we forget that maybe we're not doing good work and you're not doing much work, and then, you know, when you're recognized by an institution like the Human Sciences Research Council to say, okay, this is an early career researcher that is doing some work in this space, kind of boosts you in you know, what you think about yourself and the work that you're doing. So I think that would be the first one. And also just as an individual that is interested in not just higher education, but also in terms of methodologies, how do we do this research? This is an important experience for me to be able to understand the details of how you actually do engage research and be able to build on it and talk to others and teach others as well. The connections that we've built here are important, you know, because when you present and someone thinks, oh yeah, you are now an expert in this photo voice, and they want your contacts and you want to discuss all these things. So I think those are important aspects, and I think as I look forward to what happens post PhD, this is the knowledge that I will carry with me to be able to, you know, help me further in my academic career.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. So I've been challenged, you know, moving on from here. Like, I feel something new. I feel there's a lot that I've learned. I think the experience gathered from the different speakers that I've given talks, plenary sessions, but also when you look at the quality of the conversations within the breakaway sessions, to an extent it has given me a bit of that rigor to say there's something that I can do when I go back home. And I think it's in line with the same issue to say, okay, we are at different levels in terms of understanding, but also incorporating issues of engaged research in our policies and all that. And one thing that I've learned is there's quite a lot of work that I need to do back home. And one of them is to say, okay, go back to my institution, you know, share these reflections and see how best we can adopt, you know, one or two things, take into account the contextual realities. So I mentioned in my presentation earlier on that in the context of Malawi, the issue around the 3 pillars of universities of higher education or higher education, issues of academic teaching, research, and community engagement, they are supposed to fit into each other. And I think issues of community engagement somehow is supposed to be in the middle, you know, something that like holding both pillars, because you teach based on what you have researched, you know, and then, you know, something like that. But I think in most cases, what has been seen is that there's kind of a bit of a disconnect, you know, between community engagement and teaching and also a bit of research. So I think it's one area that I feel like we need to strengthen a lot. And I'm going back with that renewed energy to say, how can we influence, you know, how can we redesign our curriculum? How can we influence institutional policies in terms of probably championing engaged research, depending on the contextual realities that we are facing on the ground. So I think that's the number one step that I intend to do. And I think the other one is there's an opportunity for, you know, publishing from the journal here. And I think I want to use the experiences from Malawi to amplify it, and get it known, So within the global South, but also, the global North, the idea is to make linkages with different institutions. I mean, I've had quite a lot of conversations with different people on how best they can support us in the context of Malawi School of Government, but also Malawi, in terms of how we can strengthen what direction we need in terms of engaged research. Because at the end of the day, all things boils down to issues of funding as well. So we need a bit of funding, we need a bit of human capacity, we need a bit of which we can be able to tap from the different stakeholders that were here. So it's been an eye-opener. So I'm kind of challenged, go back and try to make these connections and see how best we can collaborate. This cross-regional collaboration, I think, is what is very key when it comes to something that I feel like is the first step that I need to do when I go back home. Thank you.
I would say the issue of mentorship networks would be one thing that I would say is critical, because as the emerging researchers, we really need mentorship, be it maybe through some conferences, some workshops, and also to be having mentors like individuals, those are maybe above your level of education, and also maybe level of where you are, and also to have these different stakeholder engagements is mentorship networks. And also for the emerging researchers, I think the issue of flexible funding models, to say, like the one that we are just being given the sponsorship to actually attend the conference, is something that I'll commend, to say, let's have these flexible funding models where we fund the projects that we feel they have a community impact, and also they also change our communities out there. So during the conference, I had the opportunity to attend one of the presentation on, it was on You Good as an approach which they are using to incorporate emerging researchers and also the youth. So I would say it's something which actually supports and also empower the emerging researchers. Then also the issue of institutional reforms, to try to change maybe the way we are doing things, and also move with time. So I would say for the emerging researchers, they should also be given a platform. We should also be given a platform to say, this is what we have, and not discourage to us, or it discourage the emerging researchers on what they think, to say this has not worked, so you are just over ambitious. So let's understand where the emerging researchers are coming from, what they intend to do, their aim, their objectives, and build from what they have. So I would think that would work for the emerging researchers.
I would do a bit of injustice if we don't thank HSRC, for the funding opportunity. I think we had so many researchers from South African context that shared quite a lot of rich insights. But I think bringing also this diverse participation and also research from different countries, brought in that contextual, challenge, realities that can also inform, policy within the South African context. Remember, we're all operating within the global South. It's like one big pool, So I think learning from what different countries are doing, the challenges and the state at which they are in terms of engaged research, has kind of also deepened my understanding, our understanding, and I think we take back home to our countries different lessons from here and try to push through the agenda around engaged research in our institutions. I think we really want to extend our gratitude to the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, but also I think in partnership with Human Sciences Research Council for the support offered to all of us here to attend this conference, which has been quite eye-opening. And I think it's also a plea to say probably we need more early career researchers in this kind of conversations, because this kind of space, I think, is what kind of can show a bit of continuity, but also it takes into account the youthfulness in terms of decision making, but also academic conversations. So we thank a lot for that.